Welcome to the Collide Kids podcast, hosted by Christen Clark. This is a show for kids and families. You are going to meet new people and have fun while you listen. Let's do it!
Hey, y'all. Welcome to the Collide Kids podcast. I'm your host, Christen Clark. The Collide Kids podcast is a show for kids and families where we learn together how life and faith collide. I am so glad that you're listening today. Thank you so much for being here. If this is your first time listening, I just want to remind you that at the end of every episode, we have the kids only segment where kids just like you get to be on the podcast. So be sure to stay tuned for that at the end. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like every fall season in the podcast, I tell you how excited I am about it being fall because I love fall so much. And I was so excited the other day that I finally got to pull out some of my fall hoodies and sweatshirts. It's like, yes, I finally get to drink my hot pumpkin spice drinks and all the fun things. And you guys, it's still like in the 80s here in Georgia. So I don't know what your weather's like where you live, but I hope that you're at least getting a taste of the fall season in some way. So hopefully I'll get to wear my sweatshirts at some point, but it's really fun to finally see some of the leaves change. And man, I just love fall. So my next newsletter coming out in October will have lots of fun fall activities and some treats that we love to enjoy at our house. So you definitely want to subscribe to the monthly newsletter. Just head over to the website, collidekidspodcast.com, and you can subscribe right there. Well, I am so excited today to introduce you to our guest. Her name is Sophie Hudson. She is a best-selling author who began blogging at boomama.net way back in 2005, and she has co-hosted the Big Boo Cast since 2007. Sophie loves cheering at live sporting events, cooking her mama's recipes for a crowd of friends, and watching entire seasons of TV shows in record time. I like those things too. As someone who loves to laugh more than just about anything, Sophie hopes that women will find encouragement, comfort, and connection through her books. She lives with her husband in Birmingham, Alabama, where they enjoy any opportunity to spend time with their college-age son. Our conversation today was so encouraging to me, and I know it's going to be encouraging to you. So here is my conversation with Sophie Hudson. Sophie Hudson, I am so excited to have you on the Collide Kids podcast today.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be with you.
Yeah, it's so fun to have a fellow podcaster.
Oh, listen, it's so much better, really, honestly, being a guest. It's one of my favorite things because it feels like all the pressure's off. You know, I don't have to be responsible for keeping up with what's recorded. I don't have to download any files. I can just show up and talk, and it's a whole lot of fun to me to be on this side of it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is fun to be a guest, but I like being a host too because I don't have to really come up with what to say.
That's true. That's fair.
We're going to have to do that today. If you want to ask me some questions, if that's like what comes out, you have to ask because you're a podcaster. Understand that.
Oh, listen, no, I'm so happy being on this side of things. I really am.
Oh, good. Well, would you just introduce yourself to our listeners today and let us know who you are and what you do?
Yes. My name's Sophie Hudson. I live in Birmingham. I've been married to David for a long time, for a lot of years. I think 27 at this point. We have a son named Alex who's in college, and I was a teacher for a long time. And then for the last maybe 13, 14 years, I've written books, and then I've had a podcast for like 17 years, which is crazy.
Wow.
It feels like forever, with my friend Melanie Schenkel, who's also a writer, and our podcast is nothing serious. It is literally like, it is about nothing, but we laugh a lot. And it's turned out to be the thing that we can't, like, we've tried to quit it so many times and we just have not been able to. And now it's one of the most fun parts of my week is getting to record with Melanie and getting to, you know, just talk about nothing with her and then let other people listen to the nothing that we talk about. So
yeah, I think it's so fun when we have friends that we can just talk to about nothing, you know?
I agree.
Like you can just call that friend, like you don't have a reason to call them. You're just calling to say, hey, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And I do love your Southern accent. Where are you from?
Oh, thank you so much. You can tell. I grew up in Mississippi. And so I lived in Mississippi for a really long time. And then We've been in Alabama now for 24 years. So basically that means there was no hope for me when it comes to sounding like this. This is the best I can do. This is the most professional my voice ever sounds. And it just, it's like a part of my personality at this point, I think.
I love it. I start every episode with, hey, y'all. That's the only way to greet people. I can't say hi.
Right. No. Or, hey, you guys. Why would you know? Hey,
Right.
y'all. I feel like y'all has it's more of a universal greeting now than it was maybe when I was growing up. I feel like people in other parts of the country say y'all now too. So
I think so too. Yeah, or we've just infiltrated the other.
That's exactly it. We've just been so persistent that everybody else has given up. Maybe that's it.
Fun. That's right. This is going to be so fun talking to you today. I can already tell. But before we get started, because this is a show for kids, I make every single guest tell me a joke or something funny. So
yes. Okay. So I'm not a great joke teller. So I'm going to tell you a joke that I have taken straight from the internet.
Okay.
Because I felt like things that are random and it made me laugh. But there are two muffins that are in an oven. And one muffin looks at the other one and says, gosh, it's getting hot in here. And then the other muffin looks back and says, a talking muffin.
That's good.
You're welcome.
I like that. I didn't know where it was going. So that was good.
That's about as best as I can do with that. So
I love it. Great job. Great job. Okay. So let's talk a little bit first let's talk about your podcast. What is your podcast called and how can our listeners check it out if they haven't heard of it before?
Okay. Our podcast is called the Big Boo Cast because way back when in the early days of ye old internet, I had a blog called Boo Mama. My friend Melanie had a blog called Big Mama. And so Big Boo Cast. Okay. And it's just everywhere podcasts are. And it really is about nothing. People tell us that it's like listening to two friends catch up on the phone, kind of,
oh yeah.
It's just, we just talk about whatever's going on that week. And Melanie's really funny. She's really quick. And so there is a lot of very sincere laughter that happens during the podcast. And so it's been a ton of fun. We've just kind of stuck with it over a long period of time. And somehow I ended up being the person who edits and kind of taught myself how to do that.
Good.
A while back. It's been a ton of fun.
That's amazing. And I've been doing this for 4 years, and I feel like that's a long time in podcast
It
world.
is.
So 17 years is amazing.
Yeah. The 17 years makes me feel like we're the mammas of podcasting. Like we're like I don't know, like you haul us out at some sort of retrospective, with with the switchboards that you used to have to poke the cords into. Like that's what we were doing. But 4 years is a long time because there are a lot of podcasts that start and just kind of fade away. Like I feel like sticking with it for longer than a year is that's an accomplishment for sure.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I just love doing it. And I love that it opens the door for me to meet great people. And and I'm an extrovert. So why not find ways to meet people on the internet in a safe and wholesome way?
Right. Right. And I'm an introvert. So it's a great way to meet people, but still be in my pajamas, right? It's a great, it's a best of both worlds situation.
Yes, you only have to get ready from here up.
That's right. That's exactly
right.
If
you want to, you can turn the video off and just do audio.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have options.
Well, I love your podcast. I also love your new book that's coming out. So it's a book for women. It's a book about leadership.
Yes.
And it's a book about one of my favorite Bible characters. I love Moses. Tell me why you wanted to write a book about Moses.
I didn't know I wanted to write a book about Moses. I just knew that I couldn't shake. I'd written a little bit in my last trade book, which came out in 2020, about Moses and Aaron and Hur. And it was one of those passages. I kept going back to it. I couldn't shake it. And I finally was like, I think maybe I need to accept that I am low key a little obsessed with Moses. Like I'm just a little fascinated. And so I didn't know, I knew I wanted to write about leadership, and I particularly wanted to write a book about leadership for women because sometimes I feel like in our churches, we don't always use the language of leadership to encourage our women. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know the Moses piece was going to come along for the ride. I just knew I couldn't shake kind of the idea of what Moses's leadership had looked like. So I got on a plane. This was about a year and a half ago. And I thought, I'm just going to read Exodus. And when I did, I was like, oh, and it was kind of like the whole book came together in my head over the course of that flight. And so I was like, well, Moses, I guess you and I are in it for the long haul at this point, because I'm going to write about this thing. So I absolutely loved getting to spend that much time kind of just thinking about and reading about and researching about the life of Moses.
And I love that the story of Moses, he didn't start out as a great leader.
No.
He really had to grow into that position.
Yeah. Listen, Moses got it wrong initially, when he grew up, and he killed a guy, which we don't recommend. And then he realized that somebody had seen it. And so then he fled, kind of put himself into exile for 40 years. And then God calls him out. And even when God calls him out into leadership, he's like, I don't want to use my voice. I'm not a very strong speaker, which I think is all of us, right? When we find ourselves kind of pulled into a new adventure. And a lot of times we think, okay, well, I'll do this, but not that. Or I'm happy to do this, but I'm no good at that. And so it really is it's the journey of the Israelites' deliverance for sure. But there's also a piece in there. It's the story of Moses learning how to trust God as well and trust how God has made him, which is a process for everybody.
Right, for sure. And I think he really had to grow into his confidence too, because it wasn't just about God doing it through him. He had to believe that God could do it through him.
Yeah. And he had to believe that when he would go to the Israelites to tell them what God had said, that they would listen. Or when he went to Pharaoh to tell Pharaoh what God had said, that Pharaoh would listen. And, Moses initially really seemed to feel like he had a credibility problem. Like, I'm going to go to these people. I'm going to tell them this. What am I going to do? And God kept assuring him, that he was with him and that he was going to have authority with these people. But it took Moses a long time to internalize that and to really walk in the full confidence of what God was asking him to do.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's easy for me to say, okay, God, I will do the thing that you asked me to do, but I'm going to prepare for it first. I need to train. Sure. I need to read all the books. I need to get all the experience, and then I can do the thing you wanted me to do. But that was not Moses' experience.
No. He did not, in fact, get to go to like speech lessons, or like, public speaking. There was none of that. It was just, he was really like, he was in it, There was no training course. There was no like 4-year preparation. I mean, it was his self-imposed wilderness in Midian. That was his preparation, which is good for us to remember. But God was with him. And ultimately, because he listened to God every step of the way and did his best to be faithful to what God was asking him to do, it was almost like he learned on the job that God was as trustworthy as he had hoped he would be.
Yeah, that's so true. Tell me a little bit about what are some leadership traits or things that you learned from Moses that you've now instilled in your own life?
One of the things, I was actually talking to somebody about this last night. I think I would have said for a long time that leadership should be humble. I think I would have said that was a critical quality of healthy leadership. I think after spending so much time with Moses, though, I might tweak that a little bit now and say that healthy leadership is teachable. And of course, to be teachable, you have to be humble. But I think just a willingness to continually learn is a huge component of leadership. A willingness to just admit, hey, I may not have gotten this all the way right. Hey, there's probably a way I could do this better. And then to be willing to take in however that lesson comes to you. There's a point in Exodus when Moses' father-in-law comes to him to celebrate really all the great things that God has done. And they make offerings and they have like a big family reunion. But that also gives his father-in-law an opportunity to watch what Moses does up close. And when he sees how Moses' days were just completely filled with listening to the disputes of the people, he goes to Moses and he says, hey, like, you can't do this. It's not good for you. It's not good for them. And it would have been so understandable if in that moment Moses had gone, hold on a minute. I've been with these people for over a year. I think I understand how to do this job. I was with them at the Red Sea. I was with them when they fought the Amalekites. Back off, Jethro. But instead, he listens to him and he does what Jethro says that he should have done, which is like establish a system, have people who are in charge. Let those people answer to you, but let them handle the minor disputes. And it changes life for everybody. in terms of how they dealt with, issues that would come up. So I think the fact that Moses is still teachable when he probably could have been maybe a little prideful, or maybe even a little resentful. Like, come on, like, can we have a minute to celebrate the whole Red Sea situation? So I think for sure, the idea that we have to be teachable, I think that's a big one. And then I think that the big theme that unfolded for me over the course of this book is just this whole idea of our sight. The word see is all over the book of Exodus. It bookends Moses' life. From the very beginning, his mother could see he was a fine baby. And then when Moses dies, scripture tells us that his sight was unhindered. And that we have to be people who are committed to, as leaders, always checking our sight. Is there anything that's interfering with it? Anything that's getting in the way of us being able to see things clearly? Anything in our own hearts or our own minds that's sort of clogging up the works? And so that commitment to sight, I think, has been a real encouragement to me, because that's not a checklist. That's more of just a continual check-in with the Lord, with Scripture, with the Holy Spirit. Like, hey, I have anything going on here that ultimately is going to interfere with my ability to lead in a way that's healthy and that calls people to higher and better. And I think it's important that we're committed to that.
I think some people in my life that call me out the most on my leadership skills are my kids.
100%. Listen, there's no faking it with the people who are in your house.
That's right.
There's no way to fool them. They know all your methods that maybe are not your best, but sometimes effective. Yeah, they absolutely will let you know. Yeah. Absolutely.
My son this morning, he's like, "So are you in a better mood today?" And I was like, "I just got up, man. Come on." So, they call it out like they see it.
They do, for sure.
Speaking of kids, I think it's really a great idea to think about our kids as leaders, even though they might not be in charge of a group yet, but they still, in fact, every morning when my kids are walking from our driveway to the bus, I shout at them so that everyone in the neighborhood can hear. Be a leader and not a follower.
That's right.
And because I want them to be a good leader and lead by example. What are some things that we can do to help foster good leadership skills in our kids besides shouting at them from the driveway?
Yeah, I think that's a good start. I think one thing, I just thought of this when you were talking, I think, we always think of the leader as being the person who's front and center, the person who's telling everybody what to do, bossing everybody around, which is definitely a form of leadership, the person who's in charge, so to speak. But I think to get kids to consider, what does quiet leadership look like? What does it look like to come along somebody who's having a tough day? What does it look like to comfort a friend who hurts? That's leadership too. So there's a kind of leadership that's definitely more public and maybe more public facing. But there's also quiet leadership that means so much in just the day to day, and that really, I think, facilitates deep relationships and facilitates a lot of trust. So what's it look like to build trust? What's it look like to build trust with your teachers? What does it look like to build trust with your friends? What does it look like to build trust within this family, with your parents, so that as we have conversations about stuff, we know that you're actually giving us an honest assessment of whatever we're dealing with. So I think there are great ways to not just like say, okay, a leader does this and this and this and this and this, but like just to consider in everyday situations, hey, what does leadership look like here? If you're in a situation with a teacher who's going through a hard time, what does leadership look like there? If you're in a situation with a kid whose family's going through a difficult time, what does leadership look like there? Because a lot of times we think of leadership as taking place in like best case scenario. I'm charging other people with a vision. But I think so much of our most meaningful leadership happens when we're required to be sort of carriers of empathy and sympathy and compassion and understanding. And I think that's a really neat thing you can see kids do with their siblings. If they have siblings, I think that's a great thing you can see. You can kind of catch people doing that within your family. Yeah. And I think you can catch people doing that with their friends, just, if they have a play date in the afternoon. So as parents, I think how neat to be able to teach constructively and to teach redemptively even in just the middle of everyday life, where it's not some separate thing you have to do. You're just acknowledging, hey, here's where I really see you being a leader. And here's the thing, as kids, come to faith and as they know the Lord and they have the power of the Holy Spirit and all that kind of stuff, they're going to have certain gifts. And so I think how great to point out those gifts as you see them, whether they're administrative or they're more like the gift of exhortation, or somebody has, the gift of hospitality, whatever it might be. Like, to point those things out in your kids, I think is a powerful deal.
You pointed out, like, talking about the spiritual gifts, and leadership is one of the spiritual gifts.
Yes.
So does that mean that not everyone can be a leader?
I think everybody's a leader. I think everybody who has influence over one other person, then you're a leader. Now, I think the way maybe the spiritual gifts inventory would term leadership is they're talking about the person who's in charge of something. They're the person who's running something to some degree. And that's super valuable. But I think no matter what your spiritual gift is, if you are a person if you're super introverted but doing things that are creative, if that's your thing, like you love to make art, you love to garden, you love to make spaces more beautiful. There's so much leadership in that. Mm-hmm. There's so much about that improves the quality of other people's lives, that gives people the opportunity to breathe, to relax, to process. And so I think, I think any person who can identify one other person they influence, that's a leader.
Absolutely. When I was working in kids ministry, I was a worship leader, and I would have teenagers come up on stage with me and help me lead worship. And I would tell those people, it doesn't matter what you do. Like, you could not sing Fall on Your Face and roll around on the floor the entire time. The kids will still look up to you.
100%.
They will respect you. And so I wanted them to know that, like, when you step off the stage, they will still see you and respect you and look up to you. So it puts that pressure on whenever we're standing in front of a group that's younger than us. We are being leaders. Absolutely.
And I used to work with high school kids, and I used to tell them that all the time. Every time you step down in that junior high, it's like a superstar has entered the building, because there's just so much, maybe not respect, but there's just a certain degree of like, whoa, adoration. When kids are older. Yes. And I used to love to do stuff at school where we put our high school girls in front of our junior high girls, just because of the way that the junior high girls would listen to what those older girls had to say. But I think it's important to remember, we don't think about it all the time, but if you're a kid in 5th or 6th grade, you are a rock star to somebody who's in 2nd or 3rd grade. Yeah. And there's a responsibility that comes with that. And you can learn from an early age how to steward that really well and how to use that influence for good. And so it's worth thinking about, like, what kind of example, what kind of leader do you want to be? What kind of example do you want to create in your interactions with those people?
Yeah. So what are some other things that you learned through studying for this book or putting this book together that helped you gain more confidence in leadership? Because I think sometimes we think, I shouldn't be the one to say that, or I shouldn't be the one to step forward or whatever. Yeah. But what are some things we can learn to be more confident in our leadership? We'll be right back after this. Raising kids in the digital age isn't easy, but Bark Technology makes products that help parents keep their kids safe online and in real life. They have an app, a phone, and a home device that lets families set parental controls on their internet-connected devices. I love the app because it helps us manage screen time and blocks websites and apps we want our kids to avoid. It also sends alerts and gives us the ability to monitor texts and social media and even track your child's location. Visit bark.us to learn more about how you can keep your kids safe online. Use the code COLLIDEKIDS to get 15% off your subscription of the Bark app.
I think one of the things that we see that happened with Moses, who spent a good chunk of time sort of working through some shame or working through some regret, that kind of thing. I think one is that, when God appeared to Moses in the burning bush, and scripture says that when Moses turned aside to see, then God called him. And I think for me, that was such a reminder that we have to be people who make note of what God's up to in our lives and don't discount it by saying, well, that's an accident. I don't think that's probably deliberate, So not to discount those times when we see God do something that encourages us, in whatever ways that he has gifted us or hardwired us. So I think one, just to pay attention to God. The other thing is, and this happened several times in the early chapters of Exodus, but just God's assurance that he would be with the Israelites, that he would be before them and behind them, like he would be with them no matter what. I think a lot of times, when we think about places where we might lead, we can kind of get in our heads, well, what if this happens? Well, what if that happens? Well, what if I get this wrong? Well, what if I mess up? Well, what if it's a failure? Well, what if nobody likes what I do? Like we can really let the what ifs start to run the show. I think that reminder, God is with me. God is before me. God is behind me. That doesn't mean I don't have to plan anything. That doesn't mean I can just show up and go like, well, God is with me. So let's see where this takes us.
Right.
But if we are diligent in trying as best we know how to walk out the things that he is making a way for us to do, that notion that he is with us is just a reminder to me of where my actual security is, where my actual protection and provision is. And it's not in how great I can do. It's not in who notices what I do. It's in the fact that God is with me as I do those things. And so that is, I think, especially, if you're starting something new and it's scary, I think that is such a comfort.
Well, I'm excited for people to get a hold of this book because I think it's so fun. And it feels like when you read it, you're like, oh, Exodus. Because when you look at the book of Exodus, you're like, oh, it's going to be heavy. But it's so fun. It's a fun book.
I'm writing about Leviticus next. I'm not really. But,
I love Leviticus.
But I just, there are just certain books of the Bible you think, I'll probably never write. I don't know why I'd write about that. Exodus was not on my bingo card. But man, I mean, the Old Testament, it's so rich. And we know that, but I don't know that I would have set out to write a book on Exodus if I had not been, so fascinated by Moses. But man, there's a lot there. And I don't get into half of it. I'm just the first 20 chapters, but
I know,
but it's so practical. It is so practical. I don't know. I love when scripture that maybe, or books of the Bible that maybe get a bad rap, somehow when you get a chance for them to become more accessible and more real and more practical in the day to day, I think that's a ton of fun. And one reason why it's so good to study the Bible. That's right. It's fun. The Bible is exciting. It's adventurous. It's a carnival. Like it's just, but it is. I mean, there's no way to get to the bottom of it. There's no way to sort of plumb the depths of it. Like it'll take you as far as you want to go because there's so much there. I love Lisa Turkers. She says the Bible is spicy, and it is. Sometimes there are spicy parts of the Bible, and you're like, whoa. And it's funny sometimes, like, maybe not like ha funny, but there are some times where it's so relatable where you can't help but laugh. That's true. Well, you guys definitely go check out her book, A Fine Sight to See. I love that you pulled that in. I love that it's going to encourage so many more people to be great leaders where they are. So thank you for writing it. Hey, before I let you go, I always ask my guests to tell me a memory from when they were a kid. So what memory do you want to share with us today? I am the youngest I have an older brother and an older sister. I'm the youngest by like 14 and 10 years. So I was always the baby by a mile, just like the ultimate tag along. And so I had this really, really fun sort of carefree childhood because my parents were tired. They had a 14-year-old, a 10-year-old, and then I come along. And they just were not like hyper fixated on me, which was the best way to grow up. And so I think a lot about just some of the stuff I did. I would ride my bike to a friend's house. That friend would live on the other side of a highway. We didn't have bike helmets. Like, our parents were just like, go, do, whatever. But part of that was my parents hit a stage in life where they wanted to see some things. And so I spent some summers in the back seat of some large American sedans as we just sort of traversed the countryside. And it gave me such an appreciation for how really it's the simple stuff. It's the everyday stuff that's the biggest blast. Mm-hmm. So, for parents who feel any pressure to make every moment precious, I would say you can take that pressure right off of yourself.
That's right.
And for kids who feel like every moment has to be pressure, I would say the most fun you're ever going to have is just in the random day-to-day stuff.
That's right.
So I have the sweetest memories of just like normal, everyday life, and super grateful for it.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many people share that their favorite memory from childhood is just a normal everyday thing. Not an amazing trip, even though they might have gone on some. It's just the day-to-day fun things, having pizza in the living room on a quilt, or, watching movies and playing outside and riding their bike.
Yeah.
Well, Sophie, thank you so much for being on the show today. This was so great having you.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Wasn't she just a delight? I love talking with her, and I love the story of Moses. And I thought that was so cool how she kept finding the word sight and seeing all throughout Exodus. Makes me want to go back and read it and pick that up too. She said, healthy leadership is teachable, a willingness to admit that I can make mistakes and learn to do better and have room for improvement. That's what makes you a healthy leader. And I think that's so true. She also said that anyone can be a leader, no matter what your spiritual gift or personality is. If you can identify one person that you can influence, you are a leader. So true. I love that she calls herself and Melanie the mammals of podcasting, since they have been doing it for 17 years. So I definitely encourage you to go check out their podcast, The Big Boo Cast, and check out her book, A Fine Sight to See. You can learn more about that at her website, boomama.net. Well, now it's time for the kids only segment. This is the part of the show where you get to be on the podcast. So here is my friend Reed.
Hello, my name is Reed, and I'll be telling a joke today. What do you say when you've had the best coffee in the world? I like it a latte.
A latte. Thank you, Reed. I love that. That's a good one. Hey, if you would like to be on the podcast just like Reed was and share your favorite joke or a favorite Bible verse or a song or a quote, just head over to my website, collidekidspodcast.com, and click the tab that says Kids Only. You can record it right there, or you can send me a video and that will be featured on our YouTube page. You can send that to me through my social media. I'm on Facebook at the Collide Kids Podcast or at Instagram at Collide Kids Pod. If you'd like to support the podcast, there's a few ways you can do that. First, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on YouTube and whatever podcast app you're using, and leave a rating and a review. It really does help other people find out about the show when you leave a review, and it helps me to learn how much you like it. So I always appreciate when you share those. And you can also share this episode with friends and family and let them know why you like to listen. And anytime you think about it, I always appreciate your prayer support as well. Thank you guys so much for listening today. This has been so fun. I hope you have a great fall day wherever you are. I hope it's a little bit breezy, even if it's still hot outside. And in case no one has told you today, I would love to be the first to remind you that God loves you so much. Thanks for listening.
You don't have to go very far looking for bad news, because somehow it just finds you. So finding peace in the chaos can be really difficult, but it doesn't have to be, because the River mobile app exists. The River is a Christian music radio station dedicated to playing music to help you get through life's toughest moments or life's happiest moments and everywhere in between, and all from artists who love Jesus and are real people just like you. Listening is easy. You can download it wherever you get apps from. Just search 1049 The River or listen online at riverradio.com. And know that The River is proud to partner with the Collide Kids podcast.